What's good, y'all? It's your boy HB, final round. Gotta spark up a rack. You know how I do, man. Love my Newports. But anyways, look, man, I'm trying to get some more film study videos up. Unfortunately, I keep on getting blocked because of the copyright issues. I'm trying to find a way around that. There's a lot of good film study videos I want to reference for this upcoming fight with Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez. Danny Jacobs versus Canelo was an awesome fucking film study I did, but once again it got blocked, so I'm going to try to figure out how to get that up. Unfortunately, so now I got to kind of do some keys to the fight with this type of format, which kind of sucks because, like I said, I'd rather give y'all the visuals with the past fights with Canelo Alvarez. Now let's start here. Obviously, I'm going to primarily focus in this video what Caleb Plant needs to do. I'll focus on a little bit and make some points with Canelo and what the keys to the fight for him. But for this video, let's focus more so on Caleb Plant and the adjustments he needs to make and what he needs to do, and some of the past fights we can reference to give what I'm saying some sort of validation. Now, for Caleb Plant, there's a few fights that I see that he needs to reference. If I'm his trainer, if I'm him, I'm looking at all these fights, right, with guys that kind of emulate what he does as a fighter. They're not all the same type of fighters, but they all do have one glaringly similar obvious attribute that they all share, and that's movement. They all know how to fight off the back foot. Different styles, different ways, but nonetheless, they all have that similar attribute. Mayweather, Danny Jacobs, Erislandy Lara, Billy Joe Sanders, Amir Khan. And if I'm Caleb Plant, I'm kind of separating and grouping all those fighters and kind of looking at them in different ways towards what I shouldn't do and what I should do, and maybe somewhere in the middle of that, right? So I take Amir Khan and Billy Joe Sanders, I put them in one category, and I say, okay, this is probably the stuff I don't want to do. And there may be some things and techniques that those guys utilized in those fights, right, with Canelo Alvarez, that he can pull out and kind of reference and use to his advantage. Because there was some points in that fight with Khan and Billy Joe Sanders that they did some things to interrupt Canelo. Obviously not enough to make it a close fight, but nonetheless, they do some nice things in there. But I would group those guys into a category of, okay, these guys kind of have the ability to move off the back foot. What did they do wrong to get KO'd or TKO'd? Then I put Erislandy Lara in the middle in his own category. Okay, this dude had all the right stuff, but he wasn't able to pull the victory out. Now, some people think Lara won that fight. Some people don't, but nonetheless, so you kind of keep it in the middle. My opinion was, I don't think Lara did enough to establish his dominance. I don't think he took enough risk. I don't ever think he showed the judges that he had complete control of the fight, because he never wanted to settle down. If he did, and I think he could have won that fight convincingly, in my opinion, but he didn't do enough. So you kind of throw him somewhere in the middle. Then I think you take Danny Jacobs and you take Floyd Mayweather. Now, I know a lot of you are like, what? What are you talking about? Why would you take Danny Jacobs? He lost on the scorecards, and Canelo won convincingly. In my opinion, I thought that fight was very close. And obviously, you're probably not going to get the win on the scorecards against the cash cow of boxing in terms of Canelo Alvarez if you're Danny Jacobs. You know, there's more money on the back end if you keep Canelo, winning, than having Daniel Jacobs win that fight. But I thought it was a very close fight, and that's a film study I'm trying to get on YouTube, but once again, they're kind of blocking my content because I'm getting the film from DAZN, so I'm going to try to figure out how to work my way around that or get permission. And try to show you guys what I'm talking about with that film study, because there's lots of nice gems there. And if I'm Caleb Plant, that's one fight I'm predominantly looking at other than the Mayweather fight. But I liked what Mayweather and Danny Jacobs did in that fight with Canelo Alvarez. So those are two fighters that kind of resemble how I fight, that I'm going to take and reference and say, okay, these are some things these guys did really nice in this fight. What can I kind of bring to the table, and what can I kind of take all together from all these different fighters and come up with my own equation to give myself the best chance at winning. Now, I'm not saying that fucking Caleb Plant is going to win. I'm not saying his odds are going to increase. I'm just saying he does have a nice foundation. He does have a style that I think can pose more of a problem to Canelo Alvarez than say like a Sergey Kovalev or who is it, like Callum Smith or something. Caleb Plant does have a good style to possibly present some issues to Canelo compared to other fighters. That is true. Now, once again, not saying that's going to be enough for him to win, but let's get into it. So, the key for Caleb Plant in this fight, and you can reference all those fights I just mentioned that Canelo had in the past. Protect the body at all cost. This is the asset you have to protect against Canelo Alvarez, because what he loves to do against back-footed fighters is take your legs away from you. How does he do that? Okay, he constantly and consistently attacks the body if you let him. If you let him. Danny Jacobs and Mayweather's did not let Canelo do that, and it frustrated him. And one common theme you'll see with Canelo is when he kind of gets desperate in the later rounds, when he fights guys who like to fight off the back foot, he kind of gets concerned. He gets very aggressive and frustrated. You can see it in the Lara fight, you can see it in the Jacobs fight, and you can see it in the Mayweather fight. It's not the type of aggression he used against Billy Joe Saunders when he was trying to finish the fight. That's a completely type of aggression, completely different type of aggression, as opposed to aggression out of desperation, where he feels down on the scorecards or he's worried about how the judges may see it, and he's trying to win rounds back. He did that with Lara, Mayweather, and Daniel Jacobs in the later rounds, at a certain point in the later rounds. So Caleb Plant needs to understand, I have to protect my body. The two notable things that I saw with Danny Jacobs and Mayweather is that Philly shell. They implemented that Philly shell. And obviously, or at least the guard, okay? And Caleb Plant tends to kind of use that Philly shell, but he doesn't execute it the same way as say Mayweather. And obviously Danny Jacobs is no Mayweather, but he did use it that Philly shell guard very nicely in that fight with Canelo Alvarez. You know, and it's one thing to just have the guard, right? But it's a completely another thing to kind of understand the philosophy behind it, knowing how to roll and catch punches, understanding the positioning, you know, and shit like that. And that's one of my issues with Caleb Plant in this fight is, yeah, at times you'll see him roll some shit, you'll see him kind of implement that guard, but the philosophy is not really on par. You know, I do know he's somewhat influenced by that because I've seen him sitting and listening to a guy like James Toney, who was a master of that Philly shell. Unfortunately, I don't think this is where the experience comes into play, and to where I think that he needs more time to kind of develop and understand that philosophy of the Philly shell so he can implement it in a fight like this and be effective. I just don't think he's had enough time to kind of marinate and kind of really understand that style to where he can make it effective in this fight. But nonetheless, he's going to have a chance to prove it. He's going to have a training camp to kind of make the adjustments. And if he can kind of pick up on the stuff that I'm talking about, he can make this a very interesting fight. So with that Philly shell guard, even though Caleb Plant moves very nicely, he has good footwork, that doesn't mean he has good head movement. Now, he does have fairly decent head movement. He moves his head well at times. But the problem with him is that he gets caught with a lot of shit. You know, he gets caught with a lot of jabs, a lot of double jabs, which is going to be there for Canelo. A lot of lead hooks, which is going to be there for Canelo. Lots of 1-2s, which is going to be there for Canelo. And that's my problem with Caleb Plant. He needs better head movement, and not necessarily better head movement. Once again, he needs to understand the philosophy behind that Philly shell. You know, one of my issues I see with Caleb Plant, sometimes he'll get in that guard, but then he'll kind of dip out defensively with his footwork and he'll try to pivot out. And as he's doing that, he gets caught with a lot of shit. The beauty of that Philly shell is you can kind of stand your ground, you can hang in the pocket. All you have to do is catch and roll, catch and roll, catch and roll, right? Catch and roll. Use that shoulder roll. Stand your ground, okay? change it up when your back is on the ropes. You don't always have to pivot out or get anxious and try to find an exit route. Sometimes you can hang on the back of the ropes and just catch shit like you see Mayweather did, or how Mayweather did throughout his career, or how Danny Jacobs did in that fight with Canelo. Go look up the film. Like I said, I'll try to pull it up so you can guys see it for yourself. They did a phenomenal job of understanding positioning and catching and protecting their body. But the primary sole purpose of that Philly shell guard and the philosophy behind it that Caleb Plant needs to use is protect the body at all costs. That's what it's for. That's what it's for. I can take shots up here, okay? Especially in the beginning of the rounds when I'm fresh, I'm aware. I can take shots up here, but you know, what's the alternative if I don't protect my body? Okay, I get smashed by Canelo. I know he's looking for those body shots. His main weapon when he's fighting a back-footed fighter is that right hook to the body, and he's gonna rip me there constantly. As the fight goes on, I'm gonna lose my legs. As a result, you know, my guard's gonna drop. Not because I'm doing it intentionally, because my body's fucking aching. Man, I remember one time when I was first starting off in boxing, I was sparring this guy, and I had great footwork. I had way better footwork compared to him. And I wasn't experienced, and I remember this dude was just ripping me to the body constantly. It didn't really bother me at first, but then I started to notice I was slowing down as the rounds went by. I was like, oh shit, I can't move as much. Oh shit, you know, like, and he keeps on ripping me, and I gotta protect my body. And then he started hitting me with shots up to the head. And I pretty much essentially just became a punching bag for him. And that's the thing. You don't want Canelo to do that, especially with his speed and power and countering ability and his boxing IQ. You don't want that dude relentlessly ripping you to the body, because eventually he's going to take your legs away from you, your guard's going to drop, and then he's going to drop a huge bomb to the head like he did against Amir Khan. So it's just like, yes, you guys, I understand if Caleb drops his hands, he's going to get clipped with some shit. But I'd much rather get clipped with some shit early and you know, be fully aware and have my legs up under me for the later rounds and protect my body than getting to the later rounds after he's been smashing me to the body for 6 rounds straight and to where I can't move anymore. And my best asset is gone, which is my movement. So what Caleb needs to do in this camp is really focus on that Philly shell, really focusing on fighting in the pocket, catching and rolling. And one thing I hate that Caleb Plant does, I don't hate it, it's really good, but he's playing with fire if he's gonna do this with Canelo. He loves to let his hands go in the pocket. And one of his favorite combinations, you know, he'll roll under, he'll throw a hook to the body and come back with the hook to the head, and he always lands it. His punch placement is phenomenal. But unfortunately, he's not always defensively responsible, and he will get caught up to the head sometimes, which is, you don't want to get caught in that position with Canelo Alvarez. It's one thing for Caleb Truax to be hitting you with counters, but it's a completely different ball game when Canelo Alvarez is hitting you with speed, power, and counter punches. So what Caleb has to realize is that, you know, when I do exchange with Canelo, I just want to counter with pot shots, or not even. I just want to catch and roll in that Philly shell, protect my body at all costs. Because as long as I can protect my body, I'm going to have my feet in the later rounds and I can slow down Canelo. You got to understand, Danny Jacobs did a phenomenal job of this. He kept on catching those body shots from Canelo. You know, yes, he would get clipped at times, but those shots that he's blocking and parrying from Canelo going down to the body, that makes Canelo tired. And if you go watch that fight with Danny Jacobs, Canelo gets winded at the end of that fight. He completely abandons his body attack, which he did in the Mayweather fight as well. He stopped cutting off the ring, and now you threw him off his game plan, and you can kind of dictate the tempo and the pace of the fight. So your number one key and priority if you're Caleb Plant is protect your body. And how do you do that? You get in that Philly shell. And you're going to have to understand the positioning of it. You're going to have to move your head very well. And if you can't do that, then just learn how to catch out of it. Learn how to catch and roll. One thing Caleb can do, I never see him catching jabs with his right hand. Catch the jab with your right hand and then roll the right. Catch the jab with your right hand, roll with the right. Catch the hook. You know, and maybe come back with a pot shot with a cross, or maybe catch to the hook to the body, come back with an uppercut. Very efficient shit. You don't need to let your hands go in exchange with Canelo for long periods of time. That's very dangerous. You know, another thing that Caleb needs to do is change up the looks throughout the fight. You don't want to become predictable. And I did see Daniel Jacobs do this, and he was successful doing it within that fight. But it would be very dangerous for Caleb to do this, but maybe implement a little bit of the southpaw stance. Why? Because it changes up the timing, it changes up the tempo, it changes up the rhythm. It makes Canelo have to think, have to reset, have to completely implement a different approach, because the positioning game changes when an opponent is southpaw. And what Danny Jacobs did so well in that Canelo fight, he was changing his guard, high guard, mid-range, you know, Philly shell. Then he would go to southpaw, do the same thing, high guard, mid-range, Philly shell, maybe hands down. And he constantly would give different looks. On top of that, give different looks every time Canelo backs you up to the corner or with your backs to the rope. You know, don't always just pivot out with your jab. I know, you know, Caleb Plant loves tripling up on his jab and pivoting out back to the center of the ring, and you'll kind of lower his level. And it works. It's a good tool for them to have, you know, jab, 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 and he'll kind of pivot his way out of off the ropes or out of a corner. Phenomenal for him to have, but you can't do the same thing. I saw him do that in some of his fights where it gets to the later rounds and he becomes very predictable about how he tries to maneuver his back off the ropes or the corner. Sometimes you may want to smother. Sometimes you may want to have suppressive fire, throw a combination. You might not necessarily land, but maybe you get some respect from Canelo. He backs up off of you and you get some real estate back. Sometimes you may want to feint. That's a nice, easy thing to do right there. It doesn't expend much energy. Throws your opponent, backs him off of you for a sec. It gives him a different look, throws his timing off. Sometimes you want to throw a combination, you know, and then smother, and then reposition yourself back to the center of the ring. Sometimes you want to L step, right? Go out to the right. Sometimes you want to pivot, you know. Use all those different options. Maybe you want to turn southpaw at times. You know, give you different ways you can find exit routes out of the center of the ring. Mix it up if you're Caleb Plant. Don't just constantly do the same thing every time you get caught in a corner with your backs to the rope. And it's important to have ring awareness. Be aware of where you're at in the ring, because you don't want to be so far back onto the ropes to where you can't kind of improvise how you're gonna make your exit strategy. And here's another thing. Sometimes when you get your back to the ropes or the corner, you wanna fight there. You wanna be comfortable and fight there. You don't always wanna skate. You still have to preserve your legs. And if you're constantly moving back, that's very exhausting to do in a fight. It's very exhausting. Even if that's your style, it's still very exhausting. If you notice in that Mayweather fight and Danny Jacobs fight, they don't just constantly move back, they move forward at times. They fight in the pocket. They sit with their backs on the ropes and they exchange, or the corner. You know, these are great ways to kind of change the tempo. Not only that, but show the refs you're in control. You can box in many ways. You're the ring general. And not only that, but you preserve your legs. You know, one of the key differences in the Jacobs and Mayweather, how they handled Canelo, they would push him back at times. They wouldn't just, you know, let him bully them around the ring. And I like what Jacobs did. He would be very calculated in his risk. So at the end of each round, he would come on strong to Canelo. He would push Canelo back to the ropes, or maybe he would hang in the center of the ring with him in exchange. Now, that's a little bit risky for Caleb Plant. Like I said, Danny Jacobs is a little bit more thicker and sturdier than Caleb Plant, but Caleb Plant's not a small dude either. So, but it's smart to kind of come strong at the end of the round. Okay, you got 10 seconds left, right? You're showing the refs you're here to fight. And if you do so happen to get clipped, okay, you can make it out of the round and recover for a minute. You know what I'm saying? You can go back to the corner and recover, get back on your feet and get back to it. Take calculated risk if you're Caleb Plant. You're gonna have to push forward at times in this matchup. And another thing Caleb Plant needs to be aware of is if you do so happen to push Canelo back, you have to be careful, for one, because Canelo is very tricky. He does a little bit of everything, and sometimes he does like to kind of fight off the back foot, or maybe he'll hang off and he'll stop putting pressure and cutting off the ring. And he'll lull you to sleep, execute his head movement, and then when he'll let you let your hands go, and then when you least expect it, he'll try to catch you with a hook. He'll try to catch you with a check hook or a lead hook, and he'll try to catch you slipping. Or sometimes he'll get his back to the ropes, he'll let you tee off, and when you least expect it, boom. And a nice thing that Mayweather did against Canelo is when Canelo would try to set that trap against Mayweather, Canelo would back up into the corner of the ropes. Mayweather would stay on the outside and just pick him apart with the jab, right hook. Just pick him apart, staying on the outside so he couldn't get caught with anything, and he has plenty of real estate to pull out if Canelo wants to launch an attack. So these are all things that Caleb Plant needs to be aware of and he needs to do in order to put himself in the best position to win. He's going to need to match Canelo's body attack. And that's one thing Danny Jacobs did phenomenal in the fight with Canelo Alvarez to get him out of his game plan to scrap his own body attack, was he would match Canelo every time Canelo would attack him. And not only that, he stuck to his game plan. He was consistent with his hooks to the body. He would jab to the body. Danny Jacobs would throw multiple hooks to the body on Canelo Alvarez, and it would slow him down. He matched Canelo in terms of body works and actually outworked him as the rounds went on. And this is how you get Canelo out of his game plan. But you have to protect from those body shots initially. That right hook to the body is the key for Canelo against back-footed fighters. And that's the thing. You look at Billy Joe Saunders and you look at Amir Khan. They have what? The high guards, right? They have those high guards. They tend to keep their hands up here. As a result, they're giving all this up. As opposed to Mayweather, Philly Shell. As opposed to Danny Jacobs. Maybe he'd go to Philly Shell, or maybe he would keep his guard real tight right here, kind of mid-range. And that's what Caleb Plant has to understand. Like, I got to keep my guard a little bit lower. I have to protect against these body attacks. And if I protect well the first 6 to 8 rounds, Canelo will start to scrap his game plan. He'll stop cutting off the ring. He'll stop shooting shots to the body. And you can start dictating how the fight is going to go down, and you can outbox him. And another thing that Mayweather and Danny Jacobs did phenomenally in the fights with Canelo is they move just enough, half-stepping, right? Moving just enough, settling down, relaxing, not panicking like, say, Amir Khan. Now, granted, Amir Khan is a small dude. It was probably going to be very hard for him to hang in the pocket and get respect from Canelo. But nonetheless, still, Danny Jacobs moving just enough, half-stepping, moving in inches, not feet, as opposed to Amir Khan, big movements, moving around constantly, moving with feet, not inches. You have to be efficient in your movement. I did notice Caleb Plant does move fairly nicely and efficiently. But once again, he's going to have to understand you can't always move back. You got to move forward sometimes, or you got to stay in your ground. You got to fight in the pocket. If you're going to fight in the pocket, don't get reckless. Don't let your hands go. Even though I love that combination, that double hook that he throws, he gets caught too much. Scrap it. Maybe I pick that at certain points in the fight. Maybe at the end of the round, I'll sneak a double left hook, get out of there, right? But I don't want to constantly go back to that. If I'm Caleb Plant, the way I want to fight in the pocket and stand my ground is sitting in that shell, catching, rolling, pop shot with the right hand. Okay, that's it. Going back to defense. Catch, roll, boom. Okay, uppercut. That's all I need right there. Get back to the center of the ring, start boxing again. Give different looks. Maybe I give him a high guard. My back's getting close to the ring. Maybe I smother. Reposition, get back to the center of the ring. Okay, let's box again. Okay, change up the guard, go more of a Philly Shell. Jab, 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 cross. I notice Caleb loves to throw that right hook to the body. That's going to be a good way to match Canelo's body shots. Slow him down, jab to the body. Okay, I'm getting close to a corner, getting close to the ropes. Okay, I'm going to jab my way out this time, instead of clinch. Okay, reposition, reset. All right. You know what, this time, I'm going to get a little comfortable. I'm going to hang in the pocket. Okay, get in my Philly Shell. Exchange a little, let Canelo let his hands go. Catch, block, my body's protected. Catch and shoot with the uppercut, okay? Okay, now I'm gonna back up, go back to boxing off the back foot. I'm getting close to a corner. Okay, I'm gonna feint my way out. Okay, Canelo steps back. I got a little real estate back. Get back to the center of the ring, reposition. And all he's doing is changing up the looks and doing what he wants to do. It's like rinse, lather, repeat. That's what Caleb Plant wants. Rinse, lather, repeat. Just change up the looks. Change up the looks. Learn how to get respect efficiently and effectively and intelligently. You know, learn how to take risk appropriately. And at the end of the day, you're gonna have to understand there's gonna be a big risk somewhere. You wanna beat the pound for pound best fighter in the world. You wanna be undisputed. You know, you wanna beat the face of boxing. You're gonna have to take risk. And I think the big risk for Caleb Plant, protect the body at all costs. Are you gonna get clipped to the head a lot? Yeah. You're gonna get clipped and you gotta hope your chin holds up strong. But hey, you wanna beat a guy like Canelo, you know, you're gonna have to beat a complete package. And that's where the risk is gonna come. But as long as you can keep your legs underneath you, preserve your body and preserve your movement. Don't always look to run away. Don't always look to constantly move. Establish your dominance. Just understand how to do it in pockets. And that's what Mayweather and Danny Jacobs did a phenomenal job at. They were very calculated, very calculated. And you don't necessarily need power to beat Canelo Alvarez, because Mayweather did it without power. I understand that Caleb Plant is not Mayweather, but Mayweather, he separates himself from other fighters with his IQ and his discipline. Not so much because he's more talented. Like you look at Adrian Broner, very talented guy, probably maybe even more talented than Mayweather, but nowhere near as disciplined, nowhere near as patient, nowhere near as you know, the work ethic and the ring IQ, all that stuff though I'm talking about, discipline, patience, ring IQ, and the hard work, that's all shit you can attain. That's not something that is out of the realm for Caleb Plant to get, okay? But this fight, he's gonna need to be patient, he's gonna need to be disciplined, he's gonna need to be calculated with his ring IQ, and he's gonna have to be detail oriented. And that's the way you beat a guy like Canelo Alvarez, and then you make him uncomfortable. And if you can protect your body and you can make him box, he starts to forget. Oh, I need to cut off the ring. Oh, I need to go to the body. He starts to scrap that out, and now you're forcing him into a position he doesn't want to particularly be in. And can Canelo box? Of course can Canelo box. But I don't think when Canelo goes up against these fleet-footed fighters, that's his number one objective. You know, I saw Danny Jacobs force him to kind of tactically box, you know, in the center of the ring where he's not necessarily cutting it off. And Canelo can fight that way, right? But he doesn't want to be forced in that position. You know, what he wants to do against the fleet-footed fighter is put constant pressure, cut off the ring, beat his opponent to the body, beat him into submission, and then he sets up those big punches to either break your fucking orbital or to knock you into another fucking consciousness. You know, but he doesn't want to be in there, you know, constantly having to readjust to his opponent, because that's telling me if Canelo has to constantly readjust what he's doing in there, it means he's not doing it on his terms. So this is your boy HB with Fine Around. Tell me what you think. Comment below. Like, subscribe, please. We're here to talk shit. You don't necessarily have to agree with me. I'll be ready to go, guns blazing. So, like I said, I'm going to try to get some more film study up of actual tape, because I think it'll give you a better visual interpretation of what I'm trying to say instead of me standing here and kind of giving you visuals. But like I said, I got to work on those copyright issues, see if I can get permission, because I think I can give y'all some good insight to what's going on and what Caleb and Canelo can do. But I'll make another video for Canelo and the keys for the fight for him. But in the meantime, stay safe, y'all. It's your boy HB, Final Round. Get at me.